Well, first of all, happy Sussex Day and welcome to the West Sussex Record Office. It's very good to have you with us tonight. My name is Wendy Walker. I'm the County Archivist for West Sussex, and I'm really pleased to be able to welcome you to another edition of West Sussex Unwrapped. Just a few words of housekeeping before we begin. We are going to be recording the event so that we will put it up on the Record Office YouTube channel, and you will be able to catch up with it later if you want to and recommend it to others. If you've got any questions as we go through this evening, if I could ask you to put them into the chat box, and then we'll pick these up and refer back to them at the end of the session. So this evening, we're going to be celebrating Sussex Day, and with a very special edition of West Sussex Unwrapped on the history of Chichester Festival Theatre. And the Festival Theatre celebrates its 60th anniversary this year, and we'll be delving into the archives to explore its history and heritage. Our blog went live this morning, and tonight we're going to be bringing you the collections and expertise of West Sussex Record Office, Screen Archive South East, and of the Chichester Festival Theatre itself. So we have with us tonight Frank Gray, who is the Director of Screen Archive South East. Hello, Frank. We have in the Record Office, Nick Corbo-Stewart, one of our archivists. Hi, Nick.
Good evening.
And in the Festival Theatre itself, we have Helena Berry, who's the Heritage and Archive Coordinator for CFT. Welcome, Helena.
Wendy.
We've got some wonderful archive film footage to show you this evening. As it's archival film, obviously the quality does vary, and you may find that it also varies depending on the strength and quality of your internet connection as well. And I think I will now pass over to Frank to begin the evening. Over to you, Frank.
Thank you very much, Wendy. And it's a real pleasure to be here. Working with Nick and Helena over the last couple of months has been really, really entertaining and instructive because together we've been able to share our collections and our enthusiasm for the Chichester Festival Theatre and its history. Tonight, and this is true, for the very first time, we were able to bring together a set of 5 films which tell the story of the beginnings of the Chichester Festival Theatre. Those 5 films are made up of 3 films from Southern Television, which was then a very new television station in England, and 2 films from the Chichester Festival Theatre, which were made by one of its associates, Roger Gibbons, in 1961 and 1962. We begin with the Southern Television interview with Tyrone Guthrie. Now, Tyrone Guthrie was an illustrious theatre director, beginning in this country and then moving to North America. And he is responsible for setting up the Stratford Festival Theatre in Stratford, Ontario, in 1952 and 53. And what was distinctive about that theatre was that it was a commercial theatre, a cultural theatre, and not a cultural theatre. And also too, it had a thrust stage. Now, those 2 principles were something which were really, really important to the beginnings of the Chichester Festival Theatre. So I'm now going to take control of the screen and we'll look at that interview with Tyrone Guthrie.
Dr. Guthrie, you're a professional man of the theatre with some 30 years experience behind you. And putting false modesty on one side for a moment, a man of international stature in the theatre. It's rather like taking a pickaxe to crack a walnut for you to interest yourself in this Chichester Festival Theatre project. Now, why does a man of your stature interest himself in what is basically a small undertaking?
Oh, but I don't think basically it is a small undertaking. Chichester's a small city. It's only, 20,000 people. But the undertaking is a big one. They're going to put up a building and they're going to do something important in it. And this has the possibility of being an institution. That's what interests me. This isn't just getting up one play and either it's a success or it's a flop, and that's that. This is starting something that can have children, that can get somewhere.
£70,000 is a small sum of money on which to build a theatre, but it seems an enormous amount of money to get out of a small community like this.
Yeah, it's possible. Right. Well, it's possible, but of course it's only possible if people really muscle in, and those who want it both contribute money and enthusiasm to the idea, and make their friends contribute.
And you think the townspeople of Chichester and the surrounding country, the south coast, could get their hands in their pockets for a ventilator?
If they want it. Nobody wants to force it on them, of course, but I should have thought it had many, many attractions.
Do you think this project, as it's planned, is big enough and imaginative enough to attract audiences from a great distance away, London and big cities?
Yes, I think so. I certainly would go if I heard about this, because it's an opportunity to see a good play in a new way. I think we're all tired of looking at a theatre that's in a little rectangular frame. We look at things, people are looking at us in a little rectangular frame, this component and we see two-dimensional things, breakfast to supper, cradle to grave. I think we want to get out of that into something three-dimensional. And I think that the whole conception of the theatre in rather crummy downtown areas with reluctant restaurants and the shops shut, all that is gone in the provinces. I think people would now be much more prepared to transport themselves out into nice surroundings like this, and where you can get a pleasant meal, maybe even buy sandwiches and have them in the open air or in your car, or if you want to spend a bit more, get a decent meal, and make a night out of it.
Then you don't agree with the growing premise that a theatre should turn itself into some form of factory and earn its living 12 hours a day?
No, not at all.
What do you see as the future of this theatre down here in the field?
I see its future as a theatre being for quite a limited festival season. I don't know how long that
3 months
is obviously for the local people to decide. 3 months, maybe at first even not as much as that. But there are many, many uses that a building like this could offer in the winter months.
Mm-hmm. You said a little while back that you thought the design of the theatre, Mr. Powell's design, was primarily a Shakespearean design, or for Shakespearean purposes. Could you amplify that a bit?
Yes, I think so. It's designed for a performance which doesn't pretend that the thing is really taking place.
I do see.
You see what I mean? It's not important that the actors are against a background which is a minute facsimile of a real room in a real house.
But you're going for complete theatricality.
You're going for theatricality. And above all, you're going to relate the actor to the audience as closely as possible, so that everybody in that house is nice and near him, and they can see the expression of his eyes, and if he's signing a document, you know how in plays so often something quite important hinges on signing the will or the death warrant or something like that. You don't have to overact madly to let the audience see that you are in fact signing a paper. It's important that they should be close both for the seeing and still more for the hearing. But the actors don't have to lay their ears back and belt to be heard by the people in the back regions. That's the great bane of Shakespeare. That's why it always seems so false and screamy and loud and theatrical in the bad way. People have to yell it out to fellows who are sitting the distance of a 10-acre field away.
Helena, what strikes you about the comments made by Tyrone Guthrie?
Well, first of all, it's such a joy to watch those films because they're not in the CFT collection, so we don't normally get to see them. So thank you for sharing them. So I briefly wanted to pick up on 3 things that we were talking about in the last few months about the interview. So we won't have much time to discuss them now, but hopefully in the Q&A we could pick it back up. The first point is the community. The significance of community involvement from the very beginning is very evident. So with no public funding, they mentioned that they had to raise 75,000, which is approximately £2 million today, to raise through community projects like raffles, private donations and parties. And I think put simply, that without the community support, the theatre wouldn't be standing today. So this ethos of theatre built by the community for the community couldn't really be more accurate, and has been integral to how the theatre functions now today. The second point is the thrust stage, the significance of the thrust stage. So of course, Guthrie was leading a kind of revival in the use of the thrust stage in popular theatre at this time. starting, as you mentioned, Frank, with the Stratford Festival Theatre, often referred to as our sister theatre, which we're very proud of. So he advocated for the intimacy with that staging between the audience and the performer. I think he calls it complete theatricality. And I don't think we can overstate how big that moment was for British theatre. Not since the Shakespearean playhouses of the 16th and 17th century had we had a thrust stage in the UK. So that was really major. The third point is the theatre's output. So Guthrie mentions a limited festival season, so a three-month season of 3 productions. And the sense, as you kind of mentioned at the beginning, Frank, is that the theatre is not trying to be a commercial theatre. It's trying to be a creative theatre, a cultural theatre. It's trying to be luxurious, I think is what he said. And in many ways, that's still the case today. We are only a producing theatre in the summer season, other than our Christmas Youth Theatre production, of course. And in the winter, we become a receiving theatre of touring shows. So that kind of idea of us being a cultural theatre kind of resonates today as well. So we now look at an interview with Leslie Evershed Martin. So I'll hand over to Nick to introduce that one.
Okay, thank you, Helena. Yes, the next sequence you are going to see is a clip from Southern Television featuring an interview with Leslie Evershed Martin, the retired ophthalmic optician, city councillor, and twice former mayor of Chichester, who was inspired by the idea to build a theatre in Chichester by a television documentary he had seen on the construction of the Stratford Theatre in Ontario, Canada, which in turn was supported by Tyrone Guthrie. So can we have the next clip, please, Frank?
We can.
This is wonderful news for you. What do you think has appealed to Sir Lawrence about the project?
Well, I think it's the challenge of it. I think he's one of the greatest creative artists in the theatrical world, and I think it just appealed to him that here was a group of people, nothing to do with the theatre at all, who had conceived the idea of starting this, the first arena theatre in the country. I think he believes that the arena stage is one of the things for the future, and he wanted to have the opportunity of doing this right at the very beginning and creating something which we've left quite fluid for him to do.
What will be the scope of his responsibilities?
Well, he'll be in complete control of the whole of the artistic direction of this. And as I said, we have left it from the very beginning. No committees have evolved what the policies should be, except that it's going to be of the best. And that's why we went to the best man we could. But also we've left it for him to decide what the cast shall be, what the play shall be. Even all the arrangements of the stage have been left. So the man of great inspiration can come and create something and really get it exactly as he wants it.
Now, the cast. Is he likely to appear himself, do you think?
No, that is nothing known about that at all. You see, he's only just accepted, and now he's beginning to work out what the plays shall be. Shall be 2 or 3 classical, modern, Shakespeare, whatever they may be. And then after that, he will start casting of them. And if he does, who knows? Really can't say.
Can you say what his fee will be?
No, except that we offered a fee after negotiation. And then he phoned across from America and said, I'd much rather come for so much less, because I think I want to be all in the boat with you all and really be in this adventure together.
Mr. Evershed Martin, thank you very much.
So, Helena, Laurence Olivier arrives.
And spoiler alert, he did act in the first season. Just to note that Leslie there mentions the arena stage, but thrust and arena are kind of used interchangeably. So just to pick up on that. Yeah, we were talking about 2 things really with this interview. The first one, of course, Olivier arriving and the kind of significance of that moment. So before 1961, when he accepted the directorship of CFT, Olivier was working in Hollywood. He had 2 films released in 1960, the year prior, and an Academy Award nomination. So in many ways, it was quite an unexpected step in his career. And his involvement was what really supercharged the project on a global scale. And it seems evident that Olivier was interested in the appeal of the thrust stage. Leslie there mentions that he almost takes a pay cut to come. And later, his wife, Joan Plowright, remembers that he was actually looking for a really ambitious new project at that exact time. So when Leslie Evershed Martin sent him a letter, it kind of was like the 1 in a million chance that it came just at the right moment that he said, yes, this is what I'm going to take on. The second point is the free scope of Olivier's remit. So his role is both actor, manager and director in the first season, much like Daniel Evans, our current artistic director. And although beholden to kind of audience goers and critics, and to some extent funders, I think he says not a written policy. It's very much like a fake it until you make it kind of vibe of the interview, I think. And I think this is one that Olivier kind of continued because he, of course, became the first artistic director of the National Theatre subsequently. So this idea of kind of making it up as you go and constructing something and building something because you believe in it really kind of was interesting to us. So we now move on to a selection of silent colour films, which are from the CFT archive by Roger Gibbons, and they track the history of the theatre from May to November 1961. So as it's silent, we're going to be talking through the clips as we go, but I just want to mention that at the very beginning of this one, there's a very quick glance of the CFT fundraising shop that was on Chichester High Street, so don't miss that. If you could play the track, Frank.
There it is. And now we move to the 12th of May, 1961, and Princess Alexandra in Oaklands Park, laying the foundation stone for the new theatre. And there it is.
You'll recognise it out the southern entrance of the building today.
And this is the beginning of the building itself with its concrete base, concrete piers. And as Helena just said, the quite rapid construction period from May to November. The building is concrete and steel, very innovative for its time. The architects, Philip Powell and Hidalgo Moya, they had done some very interesting buildings, beginning with the famous Skylon at the Festival of Britain in 1951. They'd later go on to build the Museum of London. But this was seen as a really distinctive building for the beginning of the 60s.
And we'll see the roof later that was quite distinctive of the build as well. In a moment, we'll see the first flying of the CFT flag. Oh, there's the sign. That's McAlpine, who were the builders. See the raked seating as well there.
And there's the exterior.
It's a bit coming together now.
Of course, its famous hexagon.
Yeah.
And
there they are. Yeah. So the flag is significant, of course, because of the hexagon representing the shape of the theatre and the Greek amphitheatre, but also significant because in the middle of it is the emblem of Minerva. This is kind of a symbolic logo of CFT and a nod to Chichester's Roman past.
Just to note quickly that the flag was produced by the local artist David Goodman.
And now we're going to return to Southern Television, and this time is its film of the topping day, or the topping out ceremony. And we see similar shots to what we've just seen of the exterior, but then we go inside and we'll hear, it's not in sync, but we'll hear Laurence Olivier giving his blessing on this day, the 23rd of November, 1961. And there's Sir Laurence. Next to him is the then Mayor of Chichester.
Richard Martin, the Cairns, gentlemen who are visiting us, my dear boys, and myself, who are fellow students in the art of trying to build something. Thank you. Thank you very much for the beautiful thing which you have accomplished. As we stand here, all of us together now, it does seem extraordinarily exciting, doesn't it? It's a wonderful thing that you have done. I think that we ought to raise our glasses to the people who thought it up, this beautiful idea. Mr. Everett Martin, to Paul and Moya, who designed it. And we want to think, I think, of what is going to happen. And we want to sort of give a little blessing to the people who are going to use it and who are going to enjoy it. We're going to work it and try and make a success out of it. I want to think about the authors of the plays, the dead ones, the shades of all the dead authors who are going to be played there. I want to think of all the live authors who are going to write specially for it. I want to think of all the actors who are going to give their hearts and souls into this enterprise. And I want to think of all the other people who are going to try to make an enormous success out of this place which you have built. And I want to think of the audience and the public and what it will mean to them, what it will mean in Chichester, what it will mean in Sussex, what it will mean in England, what it will mean in the world. And I think more than anything else, than this morning, this midday, this noontide, this beautiful, wonderful noontide, more than anything else, I know that everybody is thinking of you boys and your hands that made this place. God bless you. Good luck to you.
Helena, what are your thoughts about the blessing?
It's a very rousing speech, isn't it? It's really charming. I don't think we're allowed to have favourites, but if we did, I think we'd all agree. This is our favourite. We were talking a lot about the audiences that he invokes, because that seems to be the way that he's kind of connected in the speech to different audiences, and that's what makes it so rousing, I think. He picks up on the builders, of course, that are there at the topping out ceremony. He calls them fellow students in the arts of creating things. So there's this metaphorical connection between the builders and the creators and the actors who will be working in the building itself, which I think is underlined by those shots of the tools that you can see. It's dotted throughout that. There's an excitement of making something. He also references the users of the theatre, the sense of all those writers, directors, actors in the future, and even the dead ones. So he's kind of like all times almost converging together at this milestone moment. And the third audience is the audiences beyond. So he mentions the audiences of Chichester, but not only Chichester, Sussex, not only Sussex, England and the world. And I think it's striking that in 2022, we reach audiences far beyond perhaps the imagination of Olivier and those at the time. But Olivier clearly had the foresight for this. He kind of sees beyond the local, and he's aware that the theatre is on the world stage. He has a bigger vision that I think comes across in that speech. So we now continue to the first of our silent colour films. So we see the construction of the theatre from late 61 through to the first opening night of Fletcher's Jacobean comedy, The Chances, on the 3rd of July, 1962.
So we have first views of the almost completed theatre. Some landscaping still needs to be done.
You can see the brutalist architecture, very popular at the time and replicated at the National and the South Bank. Both theatres look unfinished surfaces, unusual shapes, heavy looking materials, concrete, small windows. Is kind of the...
It was noted at the time just how futuristic it looked.
So here's the rehearsal building, subsequently known as Gunter's, which was used for the first dress of The Chances and also as a restaurant before we had the Minerva and the Minerva Brasserie.
And here we are on opening night, the 3rd of July, 1962.
I love the cars.
Yeah. And there is John Mills attending that opening night. A television interview.
Certainly a change in outfits.
Yes. The gentleman with his back to us, we'll turn in a second, he might be Philip Powell, the architect, because of course he would be there on that night.
So I should mention as well that the date of the opening night did actually change. So it was supposed to be on the 5th of July, but it was moved 2 days prior to the 3rd of July. I don't really know why, but I think because somebody on the call may know. We now move to behind the scenes footage from the costume department. So this was the Minerva Studios, a workshop at the Unicorn Hotel, now the Giggling Squid. The theatre took over the building for costume teams, store props, rehearsals. This is a dress from the opening production of The Chances. And you can see the costumers working here. And they had people from all over come to work in the costume store. They had students from Worthing Art College. They had people come from Stratford even. So this Roman costume is from our second production of Ford's The Broken Heart, worn by Keith Michelle. Making some jewellery. And in a minute, we'll see the loading dock outside the theatre. For what set changes, here we go. So up a large ramp. You can see it wasn't a particularly easy process. So there was minimal outbuildings around the main hexagon, unlike now, meaning that temporary tents had to be erected and trailers, even for some people's dressing rooms. We subsequently had refurbishments in 1967 and major refurbishments in 67 and again in 2013 for our Renew project that kind of addressed these sorts of issues.
It's the trolley on the track.
So this is the interior auditorium, the set for the second production of The Broken Heart, and the distinctive balcony that you can see that was used throughout the opening season. And they changed obviously smaller elements around the set, but the set remained similar throughout that first season. And in a moment, we'll see it's quite dark, but you'll see the long, oh, there we go, the balcony, close up of the set. And here's the long, so there's a long steel frame supporting the cantilever roof that we were talking about earlier, that the architects were kind of renowned for. And this was really important because it avoids the use of pillars to keep the roof sight lines aren't obstructed as you have in kind of West End theatres now. So we don't have those pillars for that reason. And
now we have scenes of cast members arriving. There's Keith Michelle, who was in 2 of the first productions in that first season. Later would become very famous playing Henry VIII for the BBC. That's Dame Sybil Thorndike, who was in Uncle Vanya, and that's her husband, Sir Lewis Casson. And now we're going to go inside.
So again, a very brutalist interior lobby. We have carpet now, but not in those days. You can see the concrete pillars, and the way the building's built kind of emphasizes the lofty space of the foyer, is what Guthrie was talking about, a luxurious theatre. So we have lots of big airy spaces in the foyer that are lovely to hang out in the day and also before the show. There's the box office on the right there, where it still is today.
And now we're going to conclude with our final sequence, And it is presents 3 royal visits, beginning with Her Majesty the Queen on the 31st July 1962.
The flag again.
The flag. And there's Leslie. The marquee in place for the evening. And the limousines arrive. And there she is.
And this production was in aid of the Order of St. John and the Red Cross, so raising money for charity.
Next, the Queen is the Lord Lieutenant of Sussex, the Duke of Norfolk. And now the second royal visit. Now, on this day, it's Princess Margaret's turn. There's Leslie, Olivier. Princess Margaret on this day didn't come by car.
Looks like she's coming by air ambulance. And she was watching Shaw's St. Joan, a very big production.
Olivier, Princess Margaret, Lord Lieutenant, Lord Snowdon. And finally, we conclude with the Queen Mother's visit on the 24th of April, 1964.
And this was for a gala performance of Love's Labour's Lost, which was actually the Stratford Festival Theatre company on tour from Canada over here for a season of 3 shows. And this was also in aid of the Order of St. John, which I believe the Queen Mother was a patron of or had connections to.
Yes. Well, that concludes our film tour of the beginnings of the CFT. And now Nick's going to introduce us to the CFT collection at the West Sussex Record Office. Nick.
Okay, thank you, Frank, and thank you, Helena, for those very interesting films regarding the origins of the CFT Theatre. I'd like to say good evening to everyone and welcome to this talk about the Chichester Festival Theatre, the CFT archive here at West Sussex Record Office. As Wendy mentioned earlier, my name is Nick Corbo-Stewart. I was the project archivist for the Chichester Festival Theatre, and I catalogued this collection between 2014 and 2016. I am now an archivist with West Sussex Record Office. So before we continue our tour of some of the highlights of the CFT collection, I would just like to give you a bit of background regarding this project. We just have the next slide, please. The Chichester Festival Theatre, or CFT collection, was originally deposited at West Sussex Record Office in 1994. The project to catalogue the archive was a heritage lottery funded and was completed in partnership with the West Sussex Record Office by 2016. It was part of the process to preserve the memory of the theatre through the Pass It On project, which got underway in January 2013. This project was designed also to deliver outreach programs for the local community and schools, the creation of new digital resources website, including written memories and oral histories of those who had worked or been associated with the theatre. The final CFT catalogue was created with over 3,000 item entries and was finished in 2016. Items from this collection came from 300 plus boxes of material. This includes files of paper and correspondence, hundreds of photographs, posters, plans, programs, and various publicity prints, as well as a number of donations which had been made in recent years containing the material related to the theatre, such as additional programmes, publicity, and tickets for shows. So let's begin our tour. The collection has a huge number of theatre photographs, which include its construction, performances, special events, and people associated with the theatre. As mentioned earlier, the theatre was designed by the architects Powell and Moyer. Philip Powell was an English post-war architect, and John Jacko Moyer was an American-born architect who lived and worked largely in England. They were also responsible, as we mentioned, for the design of the Skylon for the Festival of Britain in 1951. The plans for the Chichester venue, of course, were to be freed from conventional theatre design, with the incorporation of a thrust stage, a stage which could be viewed from at least two sides. And this one was to be the first one to be put into a UK theatre for the first time in over 400 years. The building included a seating capacity of about 1,400 and was to be sited on parkland to the north of the city. In our collection, we have dozens of photographs of the various stages of the construction. They include all sides of the building and internal fitting out just before its opening. And on the screen before you, you can see Laurence Olivier with a model of the proposed CFT main house, the building in progress during 1961, and in the centre, Princess Alexandra laying the foundation stone in May 1961. And at the bottom there, you can see a plan showing the foundation stone of the main house. And these are just some of our production images. We have production images taken from within the main house, which opened, of course, in 1962, and the Minerva, which was built and opened in 1989, and other temporary theatre locations. We have currently over 2,000 of these photographs. They are fascinating for the colour and the detail they show. Of course, not only are they well-known actors represented, but also you can see the costume design, set design, and the varying emotions of the actors as they perform. These photographs were taken by professional photographers in black and white, and then later in colour. Many have written explanations on the back of them, describing their date, location, and production details. Some are marked by the press office for official release, with measurements to show how the image was to be cropped for publication by the press, or in programmes, or as part of publicity literature. On the whole, they're in excellent condition, with very little colour fading, scratches, creases, or water damage. We also have rehearsal photographs, photographs of the stage models, and costume photos. We have other formats as well, such as contact prints, negatives, and 35mm slides. And again, the images you can see in front of you on the screen are Antony and Cleopatra from 1969, The Seagull from 1973, Jane Eyre from 1986, and two productions from 2000, Accrington Pals and Small Family Business. Next, we have a series of programmes in the catalogue. These give a broad understanding of what the theatre did in 1 year. They provide a source of information for forthcoming events, the origins and the story of a production, the actors who appear, as well as those many people who work behind the scenes to make that possible. Our collection has nearly every programme associated with all venues of the CFT, including over 300 with cast lists. They range from the large souvenirs to just those of a few pages long, and they reflect the hard work that goes into a production and provide a vibrant marketing opportunity for the theatre. And here you can just see two of them, the CFT festival programmes from 1962 and one from later in 1981. Another series in our collection are the production papers. Amongst these, we have prompt books, otherwise known as transcripts, the Bible, or simply the book. These are a copy of a production script that contains all the information necessary to create a production from the ground up. It is a compilation of light, speech, and sound cues, drawings of the set, and any other information that might be necessary to help the production run smoothly. In addition to these, we also have costume Bibles, sound scripts, rehearsal notes, and performance schedules. Their content features running orders of shows, directions for stage management, allocation of dressing rooms, and details of prop purchases. They also provide a broad picture of the amount of work required in order to mount a modern-day theatre production. And here before you, you see a prompt script from Out of This World in 2004. Another significant part of the collection is related to the theatre's general management. We have committee meeting minutes, notes on theatre development, information on maintenance and venue organisation. On this slide, we have the minutes of the first CFT Trust meeting, which took place on the 10th of May, 1961. The beginning of the formal process in the running of the theatre as a day-to-day operation. It is amongst these minutes you see the appointment of the first staff, allocation of financial resources, choice of logos for publicity, and deciding on what production should be made at the theatre. These minutes represent a part of the catalogue which takes us behind the scenes of both the productions and how the theatre was run over the years by the people based in the back offices. We also have a comprehensive record from the earliest days of the theatre's administration, from the formation of the original building company to the CFT Trust, which took over the overall running of the theatre. These give a good understanding of the direction the theatre would take over the years in terms of its development and why those decisions were made. Publicity forms part of the theatre collection. We have many press releases, flyers, bulletins, and newsletters. A press release gives us invaluable information related to the activities of the theatre. It provides details about up and coming productions, information about fundraising events, activities with the community, and also what is happening within the theatre itself. For example, a retirement or appointment of a new staff member. On the screen before you, you can see a press release for Lord Poppington Meets Sir John, and that is from 1986, and also a photograph from a press conference which took place on March the 8th, 1983. During the 1980s, the festival seasons were opened by a series of these press conferences, and this photograph here shows one of those taking place, and you just might be able to make out there the actor Omar Sharif, who was then appearing in The Sleeping Prince. We do also have a number of newspaper clipping albums, and this is one of 32 ranging from 1961 to 1990. The clippings come from a range of national and local press. They are carefully pasted in and dated along with the name of the publication. They give a wide variety of information about the theatre, covering its construction, opening, and then subsequent productions. They have reviews, critique or praise of performers, discussion on the impact of the theatre on the local population, and photographs not seen elsewhere in the collection. They provide a unique history of the theatre in one place, and especially what the rest of the world thinks about it. And on the page open before you, it shows a visit from Her Majesty the Queen to the theatre in 1962 for a visit of Uncle Vanya. And this programme relates to the theatre's fundraising over the years, and more broadly, its community engagement. The theatre is much more than a performance venue. Fundraising for charity or for future development has been a feature of its activities since the 1960s. Concerts, live events such as auctions and carnivals have all taken place here and continue to do so. Money has been raised for various local and national charities or for buildings and redevelopment, such as the Minerva Studio Theatre and the rehearsal rooms. And here is a programme for a cricket match between Chichester Festival Theatre and Southern Television on Sunday, the 19th of June, 1977. Amongst those taking part are Keith Michelle, Penelope Keith, Os Clarke, Peter Blake, Patrick Garland, and for Southern Television, you might notice a certain Alistair Stewart, who later became a national newsreader. And my final highlights from the collection is this. It's an original cast recording of the Chichester Festival Theatre production of Valmouth on vinyl, starring Beatrice Redding, Vanilla Fielding, Doris Hare, and Robert Helpman. It was produced by That's Entertainment Records and recorded at EMI Abbey Road Studios in London on the 28th of May, 1982. It is interesting in being one of only 2 vinyl recordings we have of performances at the theatre, and were made for general sale to the public. It is also a great example of theatre publicity, a rare recording of an earlier theatre production, and a fascinating also for the artwork on its cover. However, for those of you who are wishing to hear and see more, we do have a small collection of other recordings of performances, interviews with actors, backstage staff, amongst which are producers and directors. This includes also interviews with the founders of the theatre from radio broadcasts of the time. And these have been copied and are available upon request. So I'd like to thank you for listening to this short presentation, and this concludes my brief tour of the CFT archive. However, I must mention that this is still a living collection. The Festival Theatre still produces more history, of course, and we are very fortunate that this archive here at the Record Office will continue to collect the papers and the images associated with both the running of the theatre and the productions that are held within it. So I'd now like to pass you over to my co-presenter, Helena, who will talk to you a little bit more about the theatre today and the 60th anniversary events that are coming up. Helena, it's over to you.
Thanks, Nick. I just want to reiterate what a wonderful resource the collection is. It's really, truly amazing, and the majority of it is freely available to view at the Records Office. So continued thanks to Nick and the team for that. So as it's CFT's 60th anniversary this year, I wanted to briefly discuss the work that we're doing today, and in particular 3 events taking place to celebrate our 60-year history this summer. So these 3 events are 3 of 5 events from our Digital Stages series. So we're now in a position where we can reach audiences undreamt of 60 years ago, both within Sussex and beyond. Last year we streamed to over 50 countries, some of our productions. So we want to build on the success of our digital work during the pandemic. And so we'll be using new technology to put the history of Chichester Festival Theatre centre stage for our anniversary. So the events will be launching from the 3rd of July, that's Sunday the 3rd of July, which of course is the anniversary of our opening night of the Chances in 1962. The first event will be Visionary Stages, which is a virtual meetup with special guests taking place on our brand new smart stage. Here it is. So during lockdown, we scanned every inch of our main auditorium, and using that technology combined with original architecture plans, photographs, and other archive material from the Records Office, we were able to digitally recreate our 1962 stage. So you can see it here, and you'll recognise from the footage earlier the balcony there and the steps to the side of it. Even the colours of the seats are the same. So every detail was taken into account. And this stage will be the virtual backdrop for Visionary Stages, which will be an exciting event with our artistic director, Daniel Evans, who will be discussing the theatre's rich history with some very special guests. So on the next slide, there is the trailer, which we can have a look at.
Hello, I'm Daniel Evans, and welcome to Visionary Stages. What do you make of our smart stage?
This is extraordinary. We are living in the future.
We're going to be seeing our original 1962 stage in all its glory by using cutting-edge digital technology to take us there. Welcome.
Hello, I made it.
You've made it. You've made it to our smart stage.
Yes!
This smart stage, where I'm standing, is an immersive video space. The camera is filming me and the live environment, including the content on these LED walls behind me, and then it extends the environment with augmented reality. Why do you like doing Shakespeare?
I cannot imagine a time when Shakespeare will not have a place on our stages.
What a beautiful stage is behind us.
It was the moment that I fell in love with theatre. Oh, this is it. This is how magic happens. I never forgot it.
I just wanted to learn the lines, put on the frocks and do it.
The trailer is also on our website if you want to take a look at that. There's a link in the chat box, so you can have a look at that if you couldn't hear that. So in the video, you will have seen standing on the stage with Daniel was Anthony Cimolino, who is the current artistic director of Stratford Festival Theatre. So our relationship with Stratford being an important focus this year, and they're celebrating their 70th season alongside our 60th. There was also John Sim, who appeared in Macbeth in 2019, writer Kate Moss, who has a long association with the theatre, and Sir Derek Jacobi, who's appeared many times at Chichester, starting from our second season in 1963. And he was also associate director at the theatre from 1995 to 6. So this event launches on our birthday, Sunday, the 3rd of July. Tickets are £5 and can be booked on our website. Again, the link will be in the chat box for that. The second event of the Digital Stages series is our digital diorama. And this is going to be an online exhibition showcasing 60 pieces from our archive, one for every year the theatre's been open. This launches on the 7th of July and will be freely available online through our website. The exhibition will include 3D images of props, model boxes, photographs, programmes, costumes, audio, video, you name it, some of which you will have seen this evening, alongside stories, fun facts, anecdotes from certain members of our history. The trophy item you can see here actually is the Loving Cup, and that was gifted to Stratford Festival Theatre by Chichester Festival Theatre as a sign of our friendship in 1964, and actually exists in the Stratford Festival Theatre archives, and they've kindly gifted us the use of that for the diorama. Another feature will be the rhino costumes from our production of Born Again in 1990, which some people here might remember, directed by Sir Peter Hall. The production was hugely ambitious. Those who were there probably remember. It had a zip wire across the auditorium, a full-size glass lift, and more than 13 full-size rhino costumes that were donated after the production to the charity Save the Rhino. We can see one here. They now appear at marathons all over the world, one even making it to the top of Kilimanjaro in 1994. So I've been delighted to have one of the costumes back at the building in order to scan it for the diorama. And as you can see here, the rhino enjoyed a lovely day at the theatre reading our 60th brochure. So thirdly, we'll be running a virtual backstage tour that will be available in our foyer to watch on headsets. This will be available from Monday the 4th of July and is also completely free. Last year, we captured 360 footage of a backstage tour, so that unlike a regular walking tour, you can virtually explore backstage while a production is taking place by wearing the headphones that you can see, the headsets that you can see in these photos. So you visit the costume department, dressing rooms and rehearsal rooms while a production is actually taking place, which of course is not possible while productions are normally taking place if we're doing tours. You listen to actors, staff members, creatives talking about their work, and you'll even get the chance to be on the stage with a company as they take a bow. And I won't tell you which company. Slide might give you a clue. I should also just finally do a shout out to my colleagues who are working on Culture Spark, which is not part of Digital Stages, but is another major project for us this year. By pure serendipity, 2022 marks the anniversaries of a number of cultural organisations in Chichester and the district, including Pallant House, who are having their 40th anniversary, Chichester Canal Trust, their 200th, the Novium, who are 10 years old, and of course Chichester Festival Theatre, who are celebrating their 60th. So united, we are putting on a creative season of culture taking place across the district. Many of you may have seen through Chichester last Friday, the Carnival of Lights, which was an amazing carnival through Chichester with lanterns. I think there was over 1,000 people attending, and it was just a fabulous event. That's one of many festivities taking place through the summer. I've put their address here, but I believe it'll also be in the chat box if you want to look at other events taking place this summer. So hopefully I'll be seeing some of you this summer, virtually or otherwise, to celebrate our 60th season. I'll hand back to you, Wendy, for our Q&A.
Thank you, Helena. And thank you too to Frank and to Nick, for all three of you, for sharing your knowledge, your expertise, and the archives tonight. It's been a lot of fun. And I do think interesting things happen when you bring together archives, films, and the arts. A very good mixture. Going on to the chat box, we have one question. Did Worthing College of Art that you mentioned evolve into what we now know today as Northbrook or GBMET at West Durrington, or was it a different college? I don't know the answer to that. Does anybody here?
I'm afraid not, no.
No.
I'm not sure. I know that I reference Worthing Art College because we had a former member on our oral history collection, which you can listen to at the Records Office. There's an oral history by one of the costume assistants at the Minerva Studios that we saw. Her name was Jean Skapterson. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But she was a student at the Worthing Art College, and she mentions that in her oral history. But I'm not sure about what happened to the Worthing Art College after that, unfortunately.
Okay. I don't know the answer, but I know a man who does. So if you're able to put your email in the chat box, I'm very happy to get the answer to you tomorrow. Or alternatively, if you want to just drop a line to our email, record office at westsussex.gov.uk, then we'll be able to answer it that way too. Does the theatre still fly that flag, Helena?
I don't believe so. We don't fly it. I don't know if we even have it. Interesting question. It's not part of the archive as far as I know. Nick, no. Have you seen it?
No, I'm afraid not, but it'd be lovely to be here, wouldn't it? But yeah. No, I'm afraid not.
Maybe we need to go on a hunt.
We have another question. What impact will the digital age have on archives such as this? And that we could have a whole new session, a whole evening session on.
Well, we could, because this evening, this webinar isn't possible without the digital age. When you think we digitize everything, and whether it's paper, whether it's film, and therefore the CFT archive, and indeed the films we have at Screen Archive Southeast, we're in this new age, and it's fantastic for sharing material, for presenting it on screen. But of course, our job is to care for both the original material, and analog media, and of course also care for our new collections of digital surrogates. So our job is to move between the two, because they're not the same; they're different.
And I think the other part of that equation is the records that are actually born digital now. Mm. So the things that we would have had in the past as paper,
yes.
Or as hard copy photographs, now come into us as digital, because that's the way they were created. So we have to have expertise in long-term digital preservation, because our paper and parchment archives go back 1,200 years. So we want to make sure that things that are created today digitally have that longevity as well. So we've created a post of digital preservation archivist at the Record Office, and we work on the digital preservation of electronic archives at the same time as looking after the paper and the parchment and the photographs. And be happy to tell you more about that, but as I say, that's quite a lengthy explanation. But it's a really good question, question.
And I think
it has changed everything.
Yeah, I think the transition as well is really not as easy as you imagine that it is, because of course historically when born digital materials were made, we would send those down to the Records Office, and then at a certain point you need to cut that off and say no, we're going to keep these digitally and no longer send down the born digital versions to the Records Office. So there's kind of like a mix and match, like there's a very difficult transition period that needs to happen.
And you have to work with platforms and things that will actually preserve those things in the longer term.
Yes.
Because whereas fires and floods and pests are the enemies of paper and parchment, with digital there's a whole series of other risks. It's far too easy to push the delete button or for things to be corrupted or no longer readable. So a whole different scenario really that we have to get to grips with and work with. But really good question, thank you. And I think another question, I'd love to know more about Helena's ongoing role at CFT. Could she tell us a little more about her day-to-day? There you go, Helena.
Well, I suppose I function as a conduit between the Records Office and CFT. So I'm both involved in the active projects going on here. We put on, as I've mentioned, a number of heritage projects to celebrate our history, while also attempting to help the Records Office to continue to preserve our history. So my job is kind of twofold, I suppose, in that sense. And yeah, day to day I can be doing a mix and match of those two things.
And a really important role.
Yeah.
Next question, you mentioned there are lots of photos. Do you have a favourite? Nick, have you got a favourite photo?
Have we got a favourite? There was rather a lot of photographs I did see. I suppose in terms of the sort of sequence of photographs, in terms of a favourite, it was really around the construction period of the theatre and seeing the structure being brought together. There's so many of those photographs. And they also show the people that actually worked on the building, the construction of the theatre, and it's little details you notice. You saw some of this in the films tonight. For instance, the way the workmen are dressed, health and safety was very different in those days. Of course, people took a much more, should we say, bigger risks. And the work they had to do often outdoors, unprotected, etc. It was quite a tough build. And yeah, the photographs we have in the collection detail that quite substantially, so definitely worth seeing. And of course, we've got thousands of images of, hundreds of images, should we say, of theatre, of the productions themselves, and some of them are quite stylistic in how they've been taken as well. So definitely worth a look through. But yeah, as an individual one, I'm afraid not at the moment.
But isn't it interesting that those photos survive? That they actually took all of those photos in such detail? Because what it says to us is that they thought what they were doing was important and they recorded that.
Yeah, it's very well documented indeed, and and it is a marvelous visual images, and as I said, they survive very well and certainly are very easy to view. Definitely.
I think my favourite, if I'm going to put my toe in the water, is that there's a wonderful photo of Eileen Atkins in our production of Vivat Regina. And she's sitting on the steps and she's got this incredible corseted dress, and the expression on her face is kind of very nonchalant, like, yeah, this is normal for me. And it's just a fabulous, it's just a fabulous photo that's of the production. And yeah, that's my favorite. Whenever I see it, I always takes my breath away.
So then, following on from that, actually, is there an archive of every Chichester Theatre production and all the actors from its inception up to now? And if so, where can I view this?
That's a good question. From what I remember of the work I did on the project, in terms of, should we say, the production paper side of it, with the earlier productions, of course, very little survived on the paper side. Of course, the festival seasons often have travelling sort of productions coming in. They would do the production at the theatre and then would leave, taking the papers with them. So scripts, etc., went with those early productions. And actually, the early productions, the main survivor is usually the photographs, and of course, some of the films we've seen tonight, and the programmes, what were those types of things which were officially produced by the theatre. Whereas later productions, of course, we have a lot more's being left at the theatre. The theatre's got a lot more involved in trying to retain that information or copies of it. So therefore, as we move through the decades, we see more of the paper side of those productions. So hopefully that gives you some idea of kind of what we're looking at, really. But sometimes the production side of it and what survives can actually surprise you. There are interesting survivors in there.
If you're talking about lists as well of productions from this opening, we do have lists of every single production and all of the cast and creatives that were in those productions. It's not currently on our website. Obviously, you can search through the catalogue, but it's not a kind of cohesive list. I should shout out Sharon, who works in the theatre management office, who is incredible, and in my absence has been making these lists for years, just from looking at brochures and little flyers that she's collected over the years. She's been here for decades, and without kind of her work, we wouldn't have some of those lists here. So yes, we do have lists, and hopefully at some point we can get those on our website or get those publicly available alongside the catalogue at the Records Office. Yeah.
Next question, who was in charge of the costumes being made at Unicorn House at the beginning?
Well, I'm not really sure. I suppose they had specific heads of department who would be involved in, like the head of costume, the costumer, head of costumer, who would be involved with that. I don't know names, and I don't specifically know a structure of who was in charge, to be perfectly honest. Nick?
It's possible that the names of those people may survive in some of the earlier minutes of the theatre. But of course, you know, it does take time to search through those to find them. But that is, besides obviously what was the production, as I said, the production papers themselves, and certainly earlier productions were very few and far between. But as I say, the official records of the theatre might have some of those names on there, which of course would be helpful. But yeah, that would require a search through the archives to produce that.
And does the theatre keep copies of productions that were streamed during the pandemic? And are these just at the theatre, or are they at the Record Office as well?
Yes, we do, and they are not at the Records Office yet. So we have a wonderful in-house team, AV technicians, sound team, who record every single production that we put on, and certain productions like Crave that we did in the pandemic, we do multicam recordings of those, and they're not publicly available at this time, but we are working on it, and but we hold them at the theatre at the moment.
Thank you, Helena. And another question, apologies if this is already in place, is there an opportunity to engage more of our younger community in these records and history, where records reflect productions, themes within national curriculum? It'd be great to share this with the Youth Advisory Board at the theatre.
Yeah. I 100% agree. Our Youth Advisory Board actually visited the Records Office only 2 weeks ago and did a tour there, and that's really part of our aim to get more young people involved. And my role, as a part of that aim, my role sits within the LEAP department, which stands for Learning, Education and Participation, and within that department sits the Youth Theatre, sits all of our community work that we do. And I think the reason, and that's not the case in most other theatres in the country. There's only one other theatre I know of where the heritage team sits in the outreach, like the theatre community and outreach department. So I think that's really our aim, and my aim is to connect the archives with younger people, and myself being a kind of younger person, under 30. It's nice to be able to hopefully champion that and kind of share my interest.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Helena. How much work has been done to identify other important people attending the launch events and early royal visits? And I suppose that's in the film, Frank.
Yes, and I must say that we only could, between the three of us, we could only identify the easy ones. And so there's still more work to be done. What's really interesting, of course, is by having as Nick was laying out, given all the documents to do with the management group, so we have a good understanding of those who are all participated in that 1961-62, but of course we don't have all of their photographs yet. So one day, and of course this is something which of course would really benefit by having enthusiasts and those who have associations with the theatre in the early days. How terrific it would be for you to come and look at the collection, and if you identify individuals and indeed have observations to make, that would be wonderful to hear.
And given that these films are going up on YouTube, the films we've showed tonight, that if people recognise them and can feed back to us from those films, that would be great. And then we can add those details then to the catalogue and the collection. Confirmed, Northbrook College, Metropolitan College, it was originally Worthing College of Arts, so thank you to that in the chat box. Another question before the Minerva, was there a small stage somewhere?
Yes, there was. There was the Tent in the early 80s, which was formed out of the New Ventures project, which was essentially a fringe theatre company that went around Chichester and did all the shows around Chichester, and then that became significant and was formed into the Tent. The Tent then, of course, eventually developed into the Minerva Theatre, so was the kind of predecessor to the Minerva. So yes, and we've had a number of small stages as well, including the Theatre on the Fly in 2012, and we had the Theatre on the Park when we were closed for refurbishment. So we've had a number of smaller structures or smaller stages, both on the site here and around Chichester.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, just to very quickly add, I mean, the archive does sort of document some of these outdoor events as they took place, and photographs, we have photographs of those, and some of the literature, certainly the publicity literature, which goes on around them. So they are, again, it's a very interesting to actually look that up at the archive here at West Sussex Record Office. You certainly will find evidence of that happening before they did finally build the Minerva.
And are there any photos of the large queues on Saturday morning for the evening performances? I remember these queues and meeting others. Happy times.
There are. There's some that from the 62 season, in fact, when people were invited to, they were queuing outside and Olivier invited them into the foyer to sleep overnight to queue for tickets. And so there's some great photos of that happening that actually have been donated by members of the community who were involved, as well as those that exist in our collection anyway.
I'm aware also in the collection there are some, like I said, Helena, there are some black and white photographs of also people queuing for events. I believe one of them is actually an aerial photograph as well, but I would have to check that to make sure. But it's definitely, I'm sure I saw that amongst the photographs. Yeah.
And there's a comment here: first prize to anyone who spots a photo of Coriolanus in 1992, Judi Dench in toga, and a modern wristwatch she forgot to take off at the dress rehearsal. There you go.
That's in the photographs forever.
And a message to Frank. The 2 Gibbons films are available in full on the Sassy website. Not sure if you... Yes. Is that right?
That's true. They've recently gone up, so they can be seen in their entirety on the Screen Archive Southeast website.
And yes, apologies that the sound didn't work on the last film, not sure why, but Claire has put links up to the website that you'll be able to watch that again. Finally, is there a Chichester Festival Youth Theatre archive, and how far back does that go and what does it contain?
Yes, there is. It's called the education section because there's lots of different strands of our community work that does sit underneath it, but there's a specific section for the youth theatre. The youth theatre was founded in 1985, so it goes back to 1985. But of course, since the millennium, the work of CFT has kind of become nationally renowned. So the kind of huge number of materials from then onwards.
Just to also mention as well, with it, sorry, excuse me, just to mention also in the archive as well that there are earlier youth productions that have taken place as well with involvement with the theatre, but of course don't always appear under that name as such. But of course, yeah, it was tried on and off for a number of years before that date as well.
Interesting. Thank you, Nick. Well, thank you once again, everyone, for joining us, and thank you to our speakers tonight. We've got a short feedback poll which Claire's just launched. If you could take the time to just fill that in for us, we'd be really grateful. We will be back with another episode of West Sussex Unwrapped in the autumn. In the meantime, you can catch up with the CFT blog that went live this morning that complements this episode tonight, and all of our earlier blogs on the website. And the YouTube channel also has our earlier and previous West Sussex Unwrapped talks. And on the West Sussex website, it'll give you details of all our up and coming talks and details of things for that. So thank you very much to our panelists, and thank you to everyone for joining us. And I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you.